Hello everyone. Adobe and Carahsoft Technology would like to welcome you to the second session of our Adobe Digital Media webinars, Refresh Your Desktop Publishing Workflows. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items. You are able to hear today's presentation through your computer speakers. If you are unable to listen through your computer speakers, you may join via telephone by entering your phone number when prompted to have the system dial out to you. All lines have been muted today to reduce any background noise, but we encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation using the Q&A pod displayed on the left side of your screen. We will do our best to address any of your questions at the end of the presentation. If for some reason we do not get to your questions, we will certainly follow up with you offline. To tell you a bit about Carahsoft, we are a trusted government IT solutions provider delivering software and support solutions to federal, state, and local agencies. Carahsoft maintains dedicated teams to support sales and marketing for all of its vendors, including Adobe. Our contact information will be at the end of the presentation, so please don't hesitate to call or email us for any of your needs. This session is being recorded, and a copy of the webinar will be emailed to you shortly afterwards. At this time, I would like to introduce our speaker for today, Gary Rayburn. Gary is an Adobe product specialist at Carahsoft. He specializes in the design family of the Creative Cloud applications. I am now going to hand the presentation over. Gary, the floor is all yours.
Fantastic. Thanks, Bethany. Again, my name's Gary. I'm with Carahsoft. I'm one of the Adobe Creative Cloud specialists here. And today I'm going to be covering the webinar for you guys. We're going to be walking through some of the useful applications, Adobe InDesign and Adobe Illustrator CC, the most up-to-date versions. And I'm also going to be touching a little bit on Adobe Stock and how we can utilize that as an asset resource and how it integrates properly with the Creative Cloud. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and share my screen, and I'm going to bring up my desktop. Bear with me. This might take just a few seconds, but it should be coming through momentarily. As soon as that loads up, we can go ahead and jump directly into our applications. Give that just a few more seconds for everybody to catch up, and we should be all good to go. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the first application. So the first thing we're going to take a peek at is Adobe Illustrator today. I'm going to open this up. And Adobe Illustrator is our standard go-to for vector art illustration. Now, the name's a little bit of a misnomer. A lot of people go into Adobe Illustrator. They use the application primarily thinking that it's going to be a free drawing application, something where you can come in and you can map out whatever you'd like to do. More so with kind of brush tools or a rasterized brush tools, allowing a lot of freehand motion. But that's actually not what Adobe Illustrator specializes in. That's more of a Photoshop thing. Adobe Illustrator is a vector program. And what a vector is it's a scalable object. So you essentially map out your objects, map out your shapes. You construct them almost like Legos to build up all of these different shapes. And then these shapes, because they are mathematically plotted using points, can scale indefinitely. And there's a lot of perks to making things like this. This is very useful for logos or different things that you might utilize for a business or a branch, simply because all those resources, all those titles that you have may need to be shifted to alternate sizes. You can blow them up, put them on a billboard, you can shrink them down to the top of your page. Whatever you need them to do, vectors will do it, and you don't have to worry about any of that nasty pixelation. So let's go ahead and show you exactly how Adobe Illustrator breaks down. I'm going to show you some of the basics, and then we're going to go into some of the newer features that the application utilizes. So I have a few examples opened up already. I have a shape builder file opened up right here. I've got a few different shapes mapped out. You can kind of see already what we're going to be turning these into. But this is essentially how Illustrator operates. The easiest way to build out shapes as a whole is to use more basic shapes to construct them. So let's go ahead and build out some of these shapes. I've mapped these out. Now, you can utilize the different tool set along the left side of the application to build out certain basic shapes. And those are all going to be from your shaping tools here. You've got rectangles, a rounded rectangle tool, which you can do from either option, an ellipsis, polygon tools, a star tool, lots of different standard shapes that you can make. And of course, when you drag these out, you'll create the exact shape that you're operating on. You can freely change these or adjust the points so you can make the shapes taller, squatter, have whatever you want to do to them. Each shape itself will also have a node that you can grab, and when you pull on these nodes, you'll be able to round the corners out to get those nice friendly looking shapes like such. Now, using these marquee tools to map out your shapes can be useful, but it's also very difficult to get everything exactly where you want it to be. Another way to do this would be using the pen tool as a freehand way to map out points, but that also is a little difficult. So we're going to show you two new tools that have been added that allows you to very easily construct shapes for what you're looking for. So what we're going to be talking about is the Shaper tool and the Shape Builder tool. So first we're going to utilize the Shaper tool. I'm going to go ahead and grab that. And the Shaper tool is a really handy brush that allows you to free draw out shapes. So if I just map out a rectangle here, just freehand draw it with my mouse, and it can be pretty messy. I can actually do this with any basic shape, and it will immediately create the shape exactly to the size that I drew. So I can do a circle here as well. And if I really want to, I can do a polygon, or it'll read it as a circle. I have to be really neat. There we go, get a polygon shape. And you can freely map out these objects. Now, if you're working off of a reference sheet, this makes it very easy to simply fill over top of it all the standard shapes that build it up. And from this point, you can freely mimic or edit all of these shapes. So I can click and drag, move these around. I'm free to rotate these up and down, change their shape, round the corners. You have all the freedom to do with all of these shapes what you would with anything else. The polygon tools also have some additional nodes. So not only can you round the corners on these shapes to make them a little friendlier looking, you can also have a little node on the side here that allows you to increase or decrease the number of sizes on the polygon. So this would be how you would come out and make your triangles, or something rather simple like that if you didn't want to freehand the shape. Now this is all well and good, but combining them is a totally different thing as well. So in the older versions of Illustrator, you would have to use the Pathfinder tools over here along the side, and these are just a bunch of standard buttons that you can use to combine shapes in different ways, either to cut them out or to combine them to a solid single shape. Now, we're not going to use these because those buttons, if you mouse over them, they'll tell you exactly what they do, but there's a much easier, friendlier way to go about doing this, and that is our other tool, which is the Shape Builder tool. And just as a fun fact, the Shaper tool has been updated so that it can utilize all of these functions itself. So you don't really have to switch back and forth, but because we have these shapes already preset, we're going to go ahead and use the Shape Builder tool. So I'm going to click away from that. And the way that the Shape Builder tool works is you have to tell Illustrator exactly what you want covered, and we're going to do that by holding down the Control key. The pointer will turn black, and then once it's turned black, we'll make our selection around the shapes we want to combine. So as you can see, when we mouse over it, it will give us these indicative little areas telling us that we've covered these sections. So now to combine these shapes, all you have to do is simply draw a line directly through the chat pod. So let's just draw a line directly through them, and you can see that we've got a nice selection going from shape to shape, and when we release, those shapes will instantaneously combine. And that's not just a grouping of different shapes. They've become one solid shape with a single path around the outline. So now you can utilize these and combine them with other shapes and continue to expand on what you're doing. I'm going to do it again real quick over here with this heart. And again, all the sections are highlighted by path. So I just have to simply draw a line through these options, and they'll be combined into a single shape. Now, you can utilize other sections of this tool as well, which allows you to bisect areas, so subtracting shapes from other objects. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this into a fish, as you may have guessed. And I'm going to drag a line through the tail into the main body here. That'll combine those shapes, and we're going to use this large triangle to bisect the mouth here. And I can do that by simply holding down the Alt key, which will switch this to an alternate function. Your cursor will show a subtraction sign as opposed to an addition sign, and I'll just draw through the triangle, and it will subtract that shape. So using the additive features and the subtractive features of the tools, you can utilize both sides to make some pretty complex looking images. And you'll see some better resolution, some higher quality vectors that we've constructed out later in the demonstration over here. And just to show you a little bit more of an applicable version or an applicable sense of what we're doing, we're going to try out on these Celtic rings as well. So I'm going to zoom in because they're a little, the area is a little tighter over here. As you can see, these are all bisected paths. And all the spaces are defined. Now we have to be careful because the blank space behind the rings is also registered as a shape. Despite the fact that we just want the rings to be sitting on a white background, these still register as part of the shape. So we don't want to accidentally draw over any of those. So let's go ahead, and I'm just going to simply start drawing a line through each of these rings. And we're going to go over and under with the design here. And as you can see, we are combining the different sections of the ring. And by doing so, we'll go ahead and we'll grab this as well, make sure that goes under. And if I click away, I think I did that properly. You can see we have a really nice set of vector rings, and this isn't something we pulled offline. We simply just used our circle shaper tool, and we combined it using the shape building tools to make this really nice looking image that we have. Now we can take this vector and we can save it to our libraries, or we can export it to use it wherever else we want to. But we're going to go ahead and I'm going to show you some of the other features of the shaper tool as well, just so you don't have to build out preset shapes if you don't want to. So the shaper tool was the one I was previously using that allows you to freely draw shapes however you want. Now they've also added a bunch of these combination features to this as well, so you don't simply have to jump back and forth between the two of them. So if I simply drag out a circle here, and it's already overlapping with that triangle, you can see when I mouse over it, we get a nice little dotted line letting you know that they are similar shapes. And to combine these two shapes, all I have to do is simply squiggle between them. I just draw a little squiggle. And by doing that, now once again, the shapes are combined. So you don't have to jump in and out besides doing these. To change the color as well, you don't have to jump between your selection tools. You can simply click directly on the shape, and then you have a nice handy little icon over here that allows you to either work with the shape as a whole, or you can go back to the bisected areas and manipulate them as you see fit. So it can go back and forth between the two shapes that you were currently using, which just makes combining things a little bit easier in the long run. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And of course, once these shapes have been made, these are just the default colors I was using. So if I want to add strokes or effects to these different shapes, I can click on this heart here, and we get all of the context information along the top bar in the application. And this is where you can add specific strokes or outlines to your shape, change the opacity, the style, as well as the stroke width. So if we want the width around the heart to be a little bigger, we can then go ahead and pump that up a little bit, and then we can change the color as well. So let's go ahead and we'll make that a dark red, and then maybe we'll change the inner color to a pink. That's a very hot pink. We'll change that to something a little less harsh. We'll go blue there. There we go. So now we have our shape, and then we can do with these assets what we will. And I'm actually going to backtrack to this page and show you exactly how that works out. So from now on, let's move on to our next image that we have. So we have here is we have a few sets of artboards. Now, artboards are a very unique tool. You can utilize them in Photoshop and a few of the other applications. What this allows you to do is you can essentially work on separate projects in the same window pane and have them saved to all the same location. Artboards are essentially, you can think about them like giant easels that you're currently working on. There's an artboard tool that you can actually grab from the window dropdown. Should already be defaulted to my tools. If I come down to the bottom here, you can see it's a little page with an indicator, and I can easily draw new artboards freehand just by whipping those out. You can adjust the size and continue to work as such. Now, the key thing about artboards is that it separates all of the work that you're currently doing to its own section. So as you can see over here in the layers panel, we have the one section that I have for the pizza, we have the mock-ups for the shirt that we're currently making, and a business card. I'm going to delete this artboard that I just drag out, because we're not going to be using that. And from these artboards, I can then interact with each of these other tools. I can bring whatever I'm working on into a single artboard, and we can save these out as individual assets. So if I wanted to move this pizza that we created, you would be able to create this pizza, little pizza slice logo that we have, doing what we did in the previous example, just using basic shapes and coloring steps. We created this nice looking logo. And I can just grab this whole thing, and I can move this over onto our mock-up t-shirt that we have using the smart guides to make sure that's aligned properly. You may not be seeing the smart guides pop up on the screen share, but they are there. And that layer is behind the other layer. So we're going to drop this back a bit. And there we go. So now we have our pizza slice added properly to our t-shirt, and we can save this out, and again, we can export the artboards at a later time. And I'm going to show you the steps to do that before we move on from the application, but we're not entirely done with Illustrator yet. So I'm going to go in and show you how to change some brush strokes and how to do some other experimental effects with some of the assets that you may want to build out in Illustrator, because working with basic shapes is great, but you can also have a lot more freedom to express different ways and different colors for your vector artwork that you're currently creating. So I'm going to switch over to this next example before we come back. So what we have here is we have, again, some basic shapes mapped out that we have to look like some of these Texan animals here. And I'm going to show you how paths can be turned into more exotic looking strokes. So what we have here is, again, if you don't create a full path, which is a path that begins and ends on the same point, that creates a shape. If you just have a single path, it creates a line or a stroke or a path, as Illustrator would call it. As you can see, these ferns here are paths. It's just a single line, single line. The snake was a path. This little line down the middle of it is also a path. And you can actually manipulate these so that they look like brush strokes, so that they don't look so straight-edged. So we can go ahead and make these changes now. So I already have the stripes of this armadillo mapped out, or the chinks in its shell mapped out. And I'm going to go ahead and select them. Now I selected them all. They're all grouped together. You can group objects by right-clicking and hitting Group. That will turn them into a single object. Now once this is selected, all we have to do is go into our Brushes panel and make sure that we're expressing the correct brush or the proper brush that we want to use. So brushes, again, all your window tools can be pulled from the top. And you would select brushes. It would pop out. I already have mine selected over here. I want to reselect these and pop this pane open. So once we have this open, you'll see a few basic brushes here. And fear not, these are not the only brushes that you have. You can actually find a lot more in the little library notch down in the lower left-hand corner. So if I go to the Brush Libraries menu, I can come up. You'll have a lot of different categories that you can pull from. I'm going to open up the artistic brushes, and we're going to open up the chalk, charcoal, pencil options. It's going to open this up in its own window. As you can see, we have quite a few more brushes here that we can pick. And now from this point, all we have to do is select the proper brush that we want. So I'm going to go ahead and use this varied charcoal brush. I'm going to put that on, and it's going to stroke, as you can see, because I have the gray color selected. It's going to turn it into that exact same color. So we're actually going to switch the stroke color, which can be done up here in the upper left corner. While it's selected, that's important. We're going to change that into this armadillo stripe color, and we're done. So we'll click away from that. As you can see, now those paths have turned into a pretty unique looking stroke across the armadillo, and it looks much nicer now than just having those black indicative lines. As you can see, there's the same thing that we did with the path down this snake here. We used a different brush here, and you can experiment. You can check all these different, you can make them all different if you want. You have complete freedom to make these look as neat or as individual as you want your art to end up looking. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add borders using the default brushes. So I have this little Texas logo at the top, and it is very plain compared to the rest of this. So I'm going to go ahead and click on it. And you can see the path around it lights up. Now these standard brushes here, some of these are indicative of borders or repetitious patterns. You can tell by the grid lock between each of these art pieces. And that means that each of these symbols will move in sequence, and then the points will be filled in with the endpoints. So all I have to do is select the geometric 15. This is the default border. And as you can see, it fills in the border with that exact stroke. You can see that the style is placed up here by the brush definitions. You can see exactly what you're working with, and you can continue to adjust the stroke or the size, and the path will manipulate as you move it. So if you create a larger version of the logo, it will adapt to wherever you decide to move those paths. So we're going to move on to the next example that we have. Now that we know how to create shapes and how to add specific effects to the paths that we have, I'm going to go and switch over to the experimental with effects options that we have. So here we go. Again, some really creative looking lions mapped out just using the basic shapes here in Illustrator. And we're going to use some effects to make some variation between each of these lions. So all their manes are pretty standard. They're all just a standard circle shape. And I've already gone ahead of time and mapped out the layers here, as you can see in the layers panel. Very important to keep everything organized. Everything is set the way that it should be. So I've got my background layers all set here. I think it's the bodies of the lions as well. So if I hide that, you can see those are just the heads. And then above that, we have the manes, which we'll be working with. And then above that, we have the faces. Now we're just going to select each of these manes, and I'm going to show you some of the different effects that you can get and some of the ways you can toy with those effects to manipulate things the way you might want them to look. So let's close this layer panel up a bit. And we're going to be working. We want to make sure we're not going to manipulate anything we don't want. So I'm going to lock the faces and lock the background layer, and I'm going to select the mains layer so we can only interact with the mains layer. So now I'm going to go over and select this first lion that we have. Select the main so you get your prompt, your little bounding box, and indicative points. Once that's set, we're just going to go up to the effects, and I'm going to find each of these effects that I've preset out. So we're going to do this zigzag effect first, and if I can find it properly, yep, distort and transform, we'll go into zigzag, and you have a prompt box that will allow you to manipulate this. Now you always want to check the preview box so you can see what changes are being made. There we go. So you can see what you're working with. And you can then toy with these to get some pretty extreme looks just off of your basic shape. So we turned a circle, now we've got this really spiky looking mane. Looks pretty great. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK, and we'll leave that where it is. So that's pretty nice. We'll come over here and we'll adjust this other one. So let's go and look for, let's see if we can find, I think it might be an artistic. We're going to look for the pucker and bloat tool, which is a pretty unique tool. And no need to memorize where all of these are. But of course, I'm not going to be able to find it. Let's see. Oh, there we go. It's in Distort and Transform. Terribly sorry for the wait. We'll go ahead and select that. And again, we'll collect preview there. And then once we've selected preview, we'll be able to then preview it. And we're not going to do all these lines because I'm sure I don't remember where all of these effects are. But you can see if we pull back, we get a pretty unique looking look with this effect, very similar to the zigzag effect. And if we move forward, you can see that the effect changes in a different dramatic fashion. So we have more rounded edges. So we'll just tilt that back a bit. And that looks quite nice. So we'll hit OK. And let's go ahead. We'll do one more of these because you're getting the picture. You can very easily manipulate your shapes to get really cool looking effects. I'm going to go down here. We'll do the outer glow because that's a very different effect. It doesn't just change the shape. It has a nice glow effect. And you may recognize some of these effects from Photoshop, from some of the other creative applications. Adobe's done a really good job of making sure that most effects can be utilized in all of the applications that can take advantage of it. So we're going to go and find the outer glow, which should be stylized. There we go. We'll go outer glow. We'll go ahead and we'll hit preview. So it pops up. And then we can adjust the mode or the color. Now, we don't want it to be black because that's not what we're going to be working. We can't see that. We'll make it white. Hit OK. And now we've got that glow. We can go ahead and we can crank up the opacity or crank up the blur a little bit so it's a little more extreme. Go ahead and hit OK. And now the effect is applied. So you have a wide range of options that you could use to find these different effects and to utilize them on the shapes and the things that you've created. Now, once you've done all of this, once you've created the work that you're trying to make, the logo or whatever you're working on, you want to be able to export these properly. And there's a bunch of new options that you have in Illustrator that allows you to do this. So I'm going to back up to our previous asset that we made, to our shapes that we previously created. And I'm going to go ahead and open them up in the Asset Export panel. And you can find that again from the window drop-down, Asset Export. And I already have it open here on my side tab. So I'm going to click that and open it up. It's a little box with an arrow. Now the asset export is different from exporting your entire project because the asset export allows you to pull individual shapes or individual pieces that you're working on and export those entirely on their own. So if I wanted to say grab this heart, I can drag it over and drop, and that'll come up as its own asset, asset 1. I'll drag this arrow in as well. We didn't recolor any of these other shapes, but that's all right. I want to make sure we grab all of these rings. I'm going to drag and drop these in. If I can grab it properly and drop those in. And they all populate in the Asset Export panel. Now they're all individually set. And now we can tweak all the different export settings that we want for each of these. Now we can select just one. You can see there's a selection bar around this. Or I can go ahead and select all multiple artboards. So if I hold down Shift, I can select all of them, make sure they're all good to go, and I can come down to Export Settings and change the way that I want them brought out. And you can do multiple settings in a single go, which is really nice. So if you want to adjust the scale, you can freely do that. We might all want them the same size, so we'll do 1 and 1. You can adjust the suffix for the file when it's exported, and you can most importantly change the format. So if you want to export them out as a PNG, you can do that. You can also export it as a JPEG if that's an option that you want, and you can tweak these for whatever project you're going to be working with them in. Once those are done, it's as simple as hitting export. Once they're selected, hit export, and those shapes will be exported out to a location you specify, whether it's your desktop or a folder or whatever else you're working with. Now, if you don't want to export out your single assets, there's another option you have for sharing your work. Maybe you're just trying to transfer this to another machine. You can easily do this using the Creative Cloud libraries. And if you're unfamiliar with that, it's a brand new feature with the Creative Cloud that allows you to sync your files or sync your assets between applications and between machines. So let's go ahead and open that up. So I'm going to go Windows, and I'm going to pull down to my Creative Cloud libraries. Let's go ahead and open that up. It should just be libraries. There we go. It's going to pop open. The logo is the little Creative Cloud there. And the way that libraries work is you can think about it almost like it's just standard cloud storage that's integrated with your Adobe applications. And it doesn't just hold full projects or files. You can hold pieces of your projects. So as you can see here in my first library that I have opened, my standard library, I have a bunch of different color swatches. I have their titles, so you can see exactly their color ID. I have some paragraph styles that I can use either in Illustrator or in InDesign saved up. I also have some graphics. I have that pizza graphic that I dragged in and dropped. We can utilize that here, along with other graphics that we have. And then down below that, we also have a variety of brushes. Some are grayed out, some can be used. The ones that are visible here are vector brushes, which means they can be utilized on pads the same way that I previously showed you. And the grayed out ones can only be used in Photoshop because those are raster brushes. But the point is you can see all of your assets listed out here, whether you can use them in the application or not. And then below that, we even have a 3D model in there for Fuse that we can utilize in Photoshop or Fuse itself saved up. And as long as I'm signed in as myself, I can access these libraries and all of the assets that I have saved. You can also create as many libraries as you want. So if you were curious, you can have an unlimited number of these libraries. So you can also organize all of your work out this way and even create collaboration folders between other users so that you can both access your assets from the same location, which is great. And it doesn't have to just be 2 people. It can be 3 or 4 or 5, however big your team is. If you want everybody to pull from the same set of assets, very easy to do with the collaboration folder there. Now, dragging assets into the library is as simple as it is. With the asset panel, we just click and drag and drop, and that artwork will be added directly into our libraries, and that's synced with Adobe. So now if I sign in at home, I can use this asset at home, or I can pull it from any of the other applications. You'll see in InDesign, I'll be able to pull this hardback out and use it for whatever I want to use it for. And with that, the only other thing that's missing with the library functions here is the key in with Adobe Stock. So if I select this, you can actually search Adobe Stock in application. So if I look for some cats, just as an example, cats will populate. You'll get a bunch of different pictures of cats that you can just browse through endlessly. And you can then use these previews or actually license those images out, and you can use those in your projects. But we'll be going into Adobe Stock next when we segue into our other application. But you can search it in your libraries in-app, which is a pretty powerful searching tool. Now, the last way you can export things is exporting as a whole project or by exporting by artboard, which is also very handy. So if I switch back over to our pizza slide here that we have, I'm going to go ahead and select that side slice logo. We're going to move that back to our other artboard. Leave that centered. Just as an example, so we have 3 different artboards set up here, and we want to export all of them. So I can come down to my artboard export tool, or the artboards tool. As you can see, they're all laid out properly. If I go to File and come down to Export, exporting as will export the whole thing as a single file. But you can also go export for screens. And if you export for screens, you'll see that you actually have all the indicative options you would expect for your different artboards. So we have artboard 1, 2, and 3 all mapped out as its own. You can select which ones you want to export. If it's just 1 or 2, you can uncheck the ones you don't want to use. You can also use your selection pane over here to make those changes. We want to export these not to our Creative Cloud files. I'm going to export these to the desktop. We're not going to go through with it right now, but I would change that location. And you can also have it open the location after you export them out. And of course, you have the same options as the previous assets. So you can change their format for how you want them exported for your different selections. Go ahead and hit export, and you can actually pull all those different artboards out as different files. Then you have the freedom to do with them whatever you wish. And with that, we've covered about half of our time in the webinar already. We kind of blew through that really quick, but I got to make sure that we fit everything in. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of this window, and I'm going to go and show you Adobe Stock real quick before we jump into Adobe InDesign. So I briefly talked about Stock when we opened up the Libraries panel. You can search it in app, which is super useful. I'm going to go ahead and open up my main window here. And in my browser, you can see this is Adobe's main page. I'm all signed in and set, and I'm just going to navigate to stock.adobe.com. And if you are unfamiliar with Adobe Stock, it is a powerful resource that Adobe has created, of course, to integrate specifically with their apps. And this is just really useful for a lot of ways. One, so it's not a third-party platform that you're pulling all these images off of, and Images is actually hitting the ball rather low. It's not just an image platform. You can get videos, templates, 3D objects, textures, everything else you might need for your creative mind or whatever projects you're working on, you can pull them all from Adobe Stock, which is pretty fantastic. So I'll just show you some examples here. There's lots of different ways that you can sift through these. If you have your license assigned to your name, you'll easily see you have this many images available to your name up in the corner, and then you can simply download them from the main page or sync them directly in your application like I previously mentioned. So let's go ahead and we'll just pull up Ocean, and we're looking for images right there. You can also search by image, which is powerful. So I'll hit Ocean, and we'll get a lot of results back. Over 2,300,000 results for Ocean images coming back. And now if I like an image that I see here, I can actually click on it, and you'll get a bunch of similar images that will populate below. You'll get the similar series and the tags that are tied to it, the dimensions of the images, they're all very large, file type, and so on. And if you like the image that you see, it's very simply easy to utilize in your app. So for a standard license, I can simply save the preview directly to My Library, and that little drop-down box allows you to change the way that the actual download functions. So if I wanted to, I can save it to a specific Creative Cloud library, like the ones that I was previously working with. You'll recognize these. These are the libraries that I had opened in Illustrator. And I have My Library open as the default one, or I can save it just properly to my computer like a standard file, or I can just immediately open it in one of the applications that I have. Now that'll be, of course, a preview. You'll have a large image, but it'll also have the watermark on it, and you can fiddle around with it. You can make sure the colors match what you're doing. You can actually tweak it and manipulate it to your heart's content. And then if you do like the way that the image works, you can simply license it, and it will save the image. Now you can save these previews to your libraries and use their previews, and then once they're licensed, you won't have to make any of those changes again. So once you've begun working with a preview, you don't have to then redo all the work if you license it. It simply just removes the watermark and makes the image its full resolution, which is pretty great. So you don't have to go back and do a lot of repetitious work if you're testing out a lot of different things on the images that you're currently working with. And it's really that simple and easy to sync, because that's how great it is to have the named licenses. So as long as you're signed in as yourself, everything is centralized to your account, and you can find everything that you're looking for. It can all be synced directly back to you. So if I come down to the tab here, just to show some of the examples that we have, videos as well, lots of 4K footage and high-resolution video. You have HD and HD 4K options for all these different ocean videos that we have. And this is just a great, if you're working with Premiere or if you're working with After Effects, this is a really easy way to find a lot of footage that you might have, or that you might not have the freedom to go out and shoot yourself. So there's a lot of options that you have here. And of course, templates is a little more in line. Should have started with templates. For what we're working with Adobe Illustrator and Adobe InDesign. There's a lot of free templates in the applications themselves, and I'll show you that in just a moment when we open up Adobe InDesign. But you can also pull different templates and different options off of Adobe Stock as well. And these are set out the way you would expect them to be, either by print, web, mobile, for photos, or for your art and your illustration, or whatever you're looking for. Lots of different template options for you here. And you can search by application as well, which is pretty handy. So if we just search Adobe Illustrator templates, we can see all of the different Illustrator layouts that we can grab and use, which is pretty great. Show some of the options. All right, and with that, that's really all there is to say about Stock. It's quite straightforward. Some of the different licensing aspects, you want to make sure that you can either get a standard license. There's different premium editions as well, and editorial options, but those are a little more advanced, and really the standard collection that they have is so wide and vast, it'll be hard-pressed for you to not find something that you're looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize this, and let's go ahead and take a look at Adobe InDesign for the back half of our webinar. So let's close this down. We don't need Illustrator anymore, so I'm going to go ahead and open up InDesign, which we have open. Great. And speaking of templates, we're not going to start here. That's already knees deep into a project. So we're going to go into our File menu, and I'm going to go ahead and hit New Document. And we'll start off fresh from the beginning. So we have a new document popped up in our window pane here. And as I mentioned, lots of free templates are included with all of the applications. And these may vary between Photoshop or Illustrator or whatever application that you're working with. But for InDesign and Illustrator, the templates are the most useful thing, which is why they populate up here. So we can check by recent files. You can see I've used 2 of them. And these are a bunch of custom measurements here that we have. You can, of course, create your own presets. You can create your own templates here along the right side. So I can rename, change the width, the units, the measurement, whatever I want to create the document the way that I want it to look. However, if we go over to Print, Web, and Mobile, these tabs here, you have 2 different sections you can pull from. So we have our presets, as you can see. If I hit View All Presets, these are some of the presets that you have for different measurements. For print, you can pull from these or adjust them manually after they've been selected. And if we scroll down, you can see we have a list of templates. We have 44, actually. And I'm not sure if all of them are free. I think they might be. Yeah, all 44 of these templates that are loaded up just naturally into the application, completely free to use. So everything here is a starting point for you. So you can look for what you're trying to accomplish. We have a nice business card layout, a newsletter-looking layout. There's different magazine options that we have. Whatever you're trying to work with for InDesign, whatever kind of PDF you're trying to make, you can then utilize these templates to get a nice head start and get a lot of the coloring, a lot of the layouts all preset, so you can focus on adding the content that you need to your project. And of course, you also have web and mobile options as well if you're looking to create different prototypes in the applications for those options. You can select those and run with them, and it'll download them right to your account for free because they don't cost anything. So what we're going to do is we're going to start a blank document just to start off with InDesign. So I'm not going to use any of those. We'll go print. I think we're going to use a pretty standard layout here. We're going to go upright orientation with our facing pages. We're all good there. We're going to add 3 columns, and I'm going to hit create, and we're going to open up a new document. Now those columns and the gutter's a little more important. You want to make sure you have proper printing specs. We're going to be making a PDF that's supposed to be viewed online. And at the end, we'll have something that we can go ahead and show around, and we can manipulate to our heart's content an interactive PDF. However, if you are going to be printing these, always good to know your printer's information, who you're going to be printing with, the specifications that they need, so you can have your measurements all right. You can change these at any time, but it is always great to start with everything proper and correct without having to go back and make any changes. So we have our gutter set to a standard layout, and this is just so our text or any images we lay out don't get cut off. And then these gutters, these columns down the middle, are just simply for alignment. You won't actually see those on the final product. Those are just so that we can lay out the stuff we're working with nice and neatly. All right, so let's go ahead and cover just some of the real basics for the people who don't use InDesign a lot, how you can utilize this program. So this is not quite a word processor, more like a word designer as an application. So the way the text works is a little bit different from the way it works in some other features like Microsoft Word. In Word, you type and your words fill the page naturally, and it's very easy to input content freely in Word. You can type and type and type and type, and that's great. However, formatting those words is quite difficult. If you've ever tried to open Word in a different format, the way that you have everything spaced out can be jumbled up instantaneously. You add one image to it, the whole thing gets thrown off, and then you're in a really big problem. Now, InDesign circumvents that by allowing you to design things exactly where you want to place them. So let's go ahead and get started on this. So for text, I'm going to go ahead and grab our type tool here. And the way that type works is you don't click to type. You simply drag out the box where you want the type to fill. So if I drag this box to this exact size, this is where my type will go. It will not go any further beyond this frame. So I can go ahead and start typing. And go ahead and hit return. It'll type just like a word processor, but when I hit the edge, it will jump back to the left side of the frame because it is all in my type frame that I have. So I can keep typing as such. Hit return, it'll operate just like its own page. So once that's all typed in, I'm going to go ahead and quickly fill this up with placeholder text so we don't have to take all day doing that. So what I've done is I've typed from the beginning all the way to the end of the frame here. You can see my cursor going. Now, there's a few different caveats with the way that text works. When you have your frame set out in InDesign, your type, no matter what way it's formatted, will never leave that frame. So it will never get out of place. It'll always be formatted the way you want it to. So that means if I blow the text up, if I make it a lot bigger, or if I go ahead and add a bunch of extra spaces in there, it will never leave this frame. And you can see, because I'll keep typing, and as you can see, nothing is happening because I am typing, but it's not showing it. Now, those words are actually being typed. They're just spilling outside of the frame. And there's a lot of ways to fix this. So you'll see a little red icon appear on the frame that tells you that text is spilling over the border, which means there's extra content laid in. So we can very easily fix this in a number of ways. We can shrink the text down so it all fits. We can extend the frame so you can see all of that extra text. Or if it's not something that you want to do, if we make the frame really small, you can click on that option to fill your cursor up with the leftover text, and then you can simply carry on to a different location on your page and put the rest of that type in. There we go. So it will go from corner to corner, corner to corner, dictated by where you drag your mouse out. And you can do this actually a number of different times. So if I come over to, I only made a one-page document. That was my mistake. Let's go and add some more pages here. Go and add some pages real quick. So if I want to, let's say, fill a page up with text, we'll make our little text window here. Right-click, and we'll fill this up with placeholder text. Now I'll make this frame really small by selecting it. And then once we make this really small, we can then take that same function and then place this text any number of times following up where we want it to be, as long as I keep re-clicking that option that we have. So as long as I keep reloading my mouse from the extra text, I can place this out wherever I need it to, which makes it very simple to work around images or map out where you want your text to be set. And this is only if you're freely bringing in your text. So you can also map out your spaces by using frames or placeholders. So sometimes when I'm mapping out the way that I want something formatted, I can use these different frame functions just to simply map out this is where the type is going to go, or this is where an image is going to go. I can place something right here. And placing objects into InDesign is very easy as well. The command is Control-D or Command-D if you're on a Mac. And if I go up to File, I can go and hit Place, and it'll populate from wherever you have last searched with your application, which is in my my Muse assets here. So I'm going to go ahead and just click one of these thumbnails, and it'll load up and place it directly in the frame that I have selected. And this perfectly segues into the next thing I wanted to talk about is images and the way you can manipulate them in InDesign. So images are also a little funky with the way that they work in this program. So if I jump back up to the second page, let's say I want to place an image in, so I'll hit Control-D, and I want to place this image on my magazine that we're building out. So I'll take this bike picture, I'll hit Open, and it'll load up on my mouse because I don't have a frame selected, and I'm just going to click and drag this out, and I'll place it right there. So I have my bicycle picture dragged out to the size I want it to be. Now, if I take my selection tool and I click on it, you can see that there's a blue outline around it. If I change the frame size, the image itself won't adjust. It'll stay the exact same resolution. And that's because what you're manipulating is the frame of the application. So when I've dragged the frame out, what I'm telling InDesign is this image that I have in here can fill up any portion of this frame, but nothing beyond it. It's the border for the picture. I'm basically changing the frame of the picture, not the picture itself. To change the picture itself, you need to simply select the option that you have in the center, and then you'll get a second bounding box, and that'll be a different color. This one's orange. It's a little hard to see with the orange of the sepia tones of this bike picture. But once that's selected, now I can freely manipulate this picture. I can move it around. I can make the image squat, and I can actually adjust the resolution of it. I can manipulate it the way you would expect to manipulate it right out of the gate. And then once your changes are made properly, the way that you want it, maybe we want to make it a little more natural, shrink it back down a little bit, you can hit OK. If I move this off to the side, you can see, you'll only see half of it because it's going beyond the photo's frame. So there's essentially 2 frames to every image that you bring in, just something really nice to remember when you're utilizing text or utilizing your photos when you're working with a document, and placing all of that in line and getting all of that in order. Now, a really easy way for you to tell if there are any issues with what you're working with is this little indicator at the bottom, and it is very small and easy to miss. It's a little stoplight that you have. And you can see I have one error listed out over here. That's supposed to be green. We'll delete that. Checking, it's still another error, so it's something else that I did. There's probably some text spilling over, or something, yep, there's still some extra text here. We'll just drag that out so we have all of that. There's still some text. Drag all of this out so it all gets used. There we go. Okay, and we'll scroll back up so we don't have to look at that mess. So if you're working off a brand new document and you're building your document out, you want to make sure that there's no errors with your document. So as you can see, we have a green light down here, no issues whatsoever. If there are any problems, like let's say text that you can't see or a photo that's a little bit out of frame, it will turn red and let you know that there is an error that you need to seek out. And you can actually click on it and it'll give you a little menu that lists out all of your errors for you. So you can jump between the different situations that you have. And I'll show you a quick example of that. If I take a text frame, again, I'll fill this with text, as we have done, and I'll shrink this frame up a bit. And because half of that text is missing, because you can't see it, it gives me an error down here at the bottom. And this is just a good way to self-check yourself so that you know there's something I need to change. I need to extend this column so all the text appears, and now I have no errors again, and I can continue to map out my article the way that I want it to look. So that's a real basic way to set up your document. Now, taking those tools that I just briefly mentioned, we can then move on to our other example that we have, and you'll get something that looks a little like this. You can map out the different project that you have. So I've got a nice little title here, and none of this is going to make sense. This is all just filler text. As I scroll down here, you can see that it's nice. It's mapped out relatively like a magazine. We have our page numbers and our columns all sorted out, and I'm going to show you how to format that properly. So there's a very cool function in InDesign. If you don't utilize your master pages, it's something that allows you to add changes to your entire document all at once. And we're going to go ahead and show you how that works. So in my page document over here, very nice little window that you have. If you pop it open, you can see your entire document. You can add pages like I previously did in the example. You can manipulate pages, move them around, jump to any place in your document, and so on. You can check other specific needs by right-clicking. on either the Properties panel or on your pages. You can make changes to individual pages. But what we're going to do is we're going to change the master page functions. And I just want to show you real quick on this blank one because totally fine. We're going to make changes to a different example in a moment, but I want to make sure you can see what I'm doing. So for the master pages, if I double-click on them, we'll be taken to a new portion of the application. And it's very easy to confuse this with the rest of the your document because it looks quite similar. We just have 2 blank pages. A big change being that you can't scroll down and that everything that you do on this page will have a dotted line around it. Now, if I make some standard changes here, let's just go ahead and drag out, let's go ahead and place an image. That'll be good. So I'll click on 2 of these, and I'll simply place them in here and here. So we'll move these back a bit so that they're on both pages. Now when I place these in, if I go back to my document, you can see in the thumbnail and on all the other pages that those images are now reflected across the entire document. So every page, every change that you make on the master page will be reflected across everything that you do. Now what I just did with this example is not a very good or reasonable thing to do for your PDF that you're creating. We'll delete those, but we'll do something a little more handy right now, like for example, adding titles, as you saw in the other example that we have, like maybe those headlines across the top, the author, or maybe page numbers, which are also very useful. So to add page numbers and the like to the master pages, you simply have to utilize some of the symbol functions that are in InDesign. So I'm going to go ahead and map out the way that my pages will work. I'll take my type tool real quick, and I'm going to make this sizable so we can see it. I'm going to type page, space, and I don't want to put any number because if I put a number here, that number will be reflected across the entire document, and that's not what we want. We don't want everything to say page 1. We want it to number itself automatically. So I'm going to go and delete that, and I'm going to come into our objects, and I want to scroll down, and I want to find the symbol that we're looking for. I want to find our type menu. I'm going to insert a special character, which is, if we go to our markers, the current page number. I'll hit that, and that will fill with the letter A. I'll make this a little bigger so we can see it. And then, of course, to do this to the other page, we'll shrink this frame just a bit. I just simply have to copy it, so I can hold the Alt key and drag that over to the other page as well. I'm going to place that down in the corner, and I'm going to place this down in the corner here. Now, because we have those symbols utilized, if we go back to our document, you can see that all of the pages are numbered automatically based on their order in the page's menu. So we've got 4, 5, 6, and 7. And this is very useful for a number of reasons. One, because you don't have to manually make any of these changes. So if I come in here and I add like 3 or 4 pages in between pages 4 and 5, as I've just done, all of the pages still stay accurate. They renumber themselves and stay in order exactly the way they're supposed to because it's ordered properly in the Pages panel. So this is just a nice, easy way to save some time and utilize the master pages for something that you might want to work with in the future. So you can make standard changes across all of your document. And you'll see what some of that looks like in some of the other examples that we have. So I'm going to switch over to this magazine article that we have. And we can look at some of the other things that we can do with a PDF. So this is just a basic flower magazine, Strategies for Long-Term Success, that we've mapped out. You can see it's got some images and some text all laid out. We formatted everything pretty properly. One big thing you might note is these question marks that are above all of the images, and that means that the image itself is missing. And what that means is that InDesign needs to constantly know where the assets you're working with are. So if you've moved a photo after you've placed it somewhere else, maybe you moved it from your desktop to the trash can or your desktop to a different set of files, it's not going to know where that photo is. So you're just going to have to relink those, which can very easily be done. There's a links panel specifically for this purpose. You can come in and see all of the missing images that you have or the images that InDesign can't find. If they're not cached, and you can go ahead and relink all of those. You just have to navigate to where you've moved them, but I highly recommend keeping all of your assets in a single location. Make a single file with all of your resources so you can pull from the same spot. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into some of the other things that you can do with InDesign here. So I'm going to show some of the interactive options we can do for our PDF that we're creating here. So let's go up to our main menu option. And as you can see, some of the functions I'll be using can be found under the Interactive for PDF options in InDesign. So if I click on this, there's a bunch of different workspaces you can select from. I go Interactive for PDF, and most of these tools will populate. I may have opened 1 or 2 other things, but depends on the workspace and the tools that you're using. All windows are available from the Windows drop-down as per everything else in all the application. You can find all of your windows from the Windows drop-down, no matter what workspace you're in. So if we're going to be making some changes to our document here, first thing we can do is we can link some hyperlinks. So that's always useful. How do we hyperlink things out? So I'm going to take my type tool, and I'm just going to highlight this title here. Maybe we want to link this back to adobe.com. So I'm going to go ahead and open my hyperlinks option. And once that text is highlighted, that's key. You can make a selection. You can do this to an image maybe if you want to do that. Maybe link it back to your site or turn the title into a hyperlink. Actually, let's go ahead and do that. We'll click on this image here. And I'm going to use my hyperlinks panel. I'm going to create a new hyperlink using the button. And then this option will come up, and you'll be able to freely manipulate this URL. So we want this to link to, we have a few different options. We have the URL. We can link it to a file, an email, a specific page, or another destination we've already created. So I'm going to go URL, and we're just going to fill in the Adobe main page there. So www.adobe.com. I would usually uncheck shared hyperlink destination. That just allows you to reference the same link you've already used again. But if we're going to be using this again, you can leave that checked so you can find it. And you can change the character styles as well if it's on text. So if I was manipulating the title here, you could adjust how the text looks, whether you want it to be invisible or whether you wanted it to reflect a proper hyperlink and be blue so it's nice and you can know that you can click it and make those changes. We're going to leave it nice and invisible just in case they mouse over it and want to click it, and we'll hit OK. And that'll add that hyperlink in. So now this image on the cover is a link to adobe.com. Now if we want to add another one, let's go ahead and add it to that title again. I'll highlight this, make a new hyperlink, and then I can go down to shared destination and I can easily reference that same URL, adobe.com. Great. We can change the character styles if we want to have the same style. We'll go ahead, we'll leave it the same style because we don't want to mess with the formatting that we've already done, and we'll hit OK. So now both of these are hyperlinks, and you can tell by that nice intricate dotted candy cane line around the image. And if I click away from the text here, the text will be able to be clicked on, or can be clicked on, once we export this out. Now, bookmarks for PDFs can also be added in your InDesign document if you want to make those ahead of time so people can jump to specific portions of your PDF. Maybe we want to go to the business plan down here. Maybe that's pretty important. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my Pages panel, and I'm going to select that page. Double-click on it so we can go there. And I'm going to go ahead and open up the Bookmarks panel, and we're going to add a new bookmark. You can rename your bookmarks Strong Business Plan. Hit OK. Now we have a bookmark placed there. And if we scroll down, you can go ahead and do this again. So we'll just place another one real quick. We'll do this text frame right here, Growing Your Business. We'll make sure that we have our proper page selected, and we'll go in and we'll just add another quick bookmark there. Growing Business. Great. So we've added 2 bookmarks to our PDF as well. Now the last thing I'm going to go in and show you how to make with your interactive PDF is maybe you want a button so you can transition pages a little easy. Maybe you want to make it cool so you can click on the options and it'll scroll through your screen. So the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you have a button you can create, and this is done very similar to the way it's done in Adobe Illustrator. I'll take my marquee tool over here. We'll make sure we have a square selected, and I'm going to drag this out as a proper square. Let's go ahead and make sure that that's not, we'll make it a different color so we can see it. We'll make it purple. Very good, and we'll go ahead and we'll increase that just a bit so we can see it. And we're going to manipulate this a bit. So I'm going to turn this off to the side. And now if I take my white selection tool, which allows me to manipulate points, I can come in and I can actually change the shape of this. And I'm going to turn this into a little arrow like we have and click away from it. Now if I hold down the Alt key, I can easily create another arrow of the exact same size. Great. And I'm just going to do the exact same thing. So I'm going to right-click and I'm going to flip this over to face the other direction. So we have an arrow going back and an arrow going forward, and it was really that easy to do. So let's go ahead and switch that orientation, if I can find it. Transform. Flip horizontally. Yes. Perfect. Great. And we want to actually take both of these and we want to place them. We're going to cut those out, and we're going to place them on the master pages like we previously have because we want these to apply on all pages that we have. So I'm going to paste these in. I'm going to go ahead and place the right-hand arrow on the right side and the left-hand arrow on the left side. Or actually, we want it to be on each page. Almost messed that up a little bit, but we'll have those set there. And I'm going to select both of these again by holding the Shift key, and I'm going to Alt and move these over to the, actually we're going to do our changes first. We're going to turn them into buttons first before we actually do that. So we have our buttons placed. As you can see, they've appeared on the rest of the document. So to turn them into buttons, it's actually very easy. I just have to select an object and go over to our interactive PDF windows and just go into buttons and forms. Now in buttons and forms, make a new button is down here at the bottom, convert to a button. So I'm going to select that. You can change the appearance of how this operates. So you can make the shape change color if you click it. You can make it change color if you mouse over it so people know that it's interactable. Always good to do. But for what we want to do, we're going to rename this just so we know what this button does. We're going to name it Previous Page, or just Previous. That's good. And then we're going to add an action. And that action is going to be Go to Previous Page. Not View. We want to go to Previous Page. There we go. And that's all there is to it. Now it's an operable button that when you click it or tap it, will move on. As you can see, the event is on release or tap to go to the previous page. And we simply need to do the same thing with the button here. And we'll rename this Next Page. And we're going to go to the next page. We'll click on that. Now those functions are set on those buttons. And as you can see, we have a little button icon indicative that they're here to use. We'll select both of them, and we'll copy them to both pages. And just like so, now we have two abnormally large sets of buttons on our document. So if we switch back to our Pages view and jump into the rest of our document, as you can see, we've got our pages. They don't really match with the way that we have this laid out, but you can see that those buttons are here. They're kind of behind the text. You can change that on the Layers panel, bring those up a little bit, but those will be on every page for you to tap and jump in between pages when you export this out as an interactive PDF, which I do want to cover real quick. So to export these options out, you want to make sure that you have the proper settings chosen. So if I go to File and bring down to our export settings, you can see that we have a lot of different options that we have. We don't want to publish this online. We want to go ahead and export this document. You can change the Adobe PDF presets here in the main menu, depending on how high quality you want your PDF to look. We're going to go into the export options, and we want to change this to an Adobe Interactive PDF. And once that's set, we'll rename this to whatever we want to do. We'll name this Example, and we'll hit Save. And then it'll ask you all of the different features you want in your interactive PDF. So I can make sure that all the pages are set. Maybe we want it to display as a spread of pages as opposed to individual pages. We'll do individual pages, and we can have it fit the page when they open it up, along with anything else. We can do it to its actual size, default size, and so on. Change the layouts if we want, open in full screen mode, and then we can also choose whether we want to embed all the features that we currently just made, whether that's the hyperlinks or the buttons or any of the other interactable content. We want to include all of that media instead of just appearance. And we'll hit Do Great, boom, and we'll go ahead and hit Export, and that will export out where we want it to go. Just letting me know that a font isn't available, that's fine. We'll hit OK. And then it'll bring out that PDF that you can then use and utilize and send to whoever else you may need. Now we're kind of running right up against the wall of the webinar. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and I'm going to bring us back to the main room. I'm going to remain in the room for an extended period of time. If you guys have any other questions that haven't been answered, go ahead, leave them in the chat pod, and we'll get to all of those. We'll be able to sort out anything you guys may want to see. And we also do personal one-on-one demos as well here. So if you want to have a one-on-one session, totally for free, just come and let us know, and we can get that all sorted out. With that, I'm going to go ahead and pass that back to Bethany to wrap things up. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you, Gary. I want to thank all of our participants today, as well as our speaker, Gary, for being with us. We hope this webinar has been helpful to you and your organization. I also ask that you please take a moment to answer the questions in the pods displayed on your screen, as we greatly appreciate your feedback. As an attendee of today's webinar, you are one step closer to becoming a winner. Want your next coffee, tea, or afternoon pick-me-up to be on us? Then attend 2 or more sessions within the Adobe Digital Media webinar, Unleash Your Creative Genius, to be entered for a chance to win a $5 Starbucks gift card. At this time, I would like to personally invite everyone to the next session within our Adobe Digital Media webinars. No code, no problem. Designed for the Web with Adobe Muse on Thursday, October 12th, as we continue to explore the latest tips and tricks within the Adobe Creative Cloud and Document Cloud. Click on the banner at the bottom left of your screen to register today. I would also like to invite all of our attendees to join us for the 2017 Adobe Digital Government Technology Conference, back for the first time since 2014 on Wednesday, November 15th, 2017 in Washington, D.C. This year's conference will feature sessions built toward enhancing the public sector's understanding of Adobe solution towards agency projects and missions, providing thoughtful and hands-on sessions for end users. Click on the banner at the bottom right of your screen for more information. We hope to see you in DC on November 15th. If you have any further questions or would like to request more information, please feel free to contact Thomas Mason. His contact information is currently displayed on the top right of your screen. Thanks again, everyone, and have a great day.